This program is brought to you by Emory University.
So does someone want to go first? I won't pick and choose, but.
Well, it was pointed out that the only woman, so
So, and if you can,
The only here.
and if you can speak up, that would be
Yes.
super.
All right, I'm Rochelle Lehner. I graduated undergrad at Emory in '89. I got my master's degree, worked in student personnel for 9-10 years, and then I switched careers into organization development and got my PhD at University of Georgia in 2005. That's where I met Michael. That was my name, that's what I do. Oh, and I'm back here at Emory. I started back here in 2008, working in the School of Medicine. I work with the staff, so I don't work with the docs that practice in the hospital. I work with the people that support them. And I do training, organization development, career counseling, all kinds of things with the staff.
Pronouns?
Pronouns, she, her. And I guess I knew from a very young age that something was different, but I didn't have the language around it or the support around it. And even when I came to Emory, I watched from the distance. There was a group at Emory at that time called ELGO, Emory Lesbian Gay Organization, and I kind of watched from a distance. Then I went to grad school, and that's where I actually came out. I did an internship at UMass Amherst up in Massachusetts, and got really dove deep into the culture and learned a lot about the culture and about myself, and went back to grad school for my second year, started going to the group on campus and to counseling, and met my first partner and my first job out of grad school. And unfortunately, as I was telling my table, that was in the early 90s, and there was a lot of discrimination. And we'll probably get into that more, but that's probably enough for an introduction.
And for the first person to volunteer, you get to decide which way you want to go downtown.
How about you go?
I knew it. Good evening, everybody. I'm Josh Noblet. I'm one of the pastors at St. Mark United Methodist Church here in Atlanta at the corner of 5th and Peachtree in Midtown. It's a predominantly gay lesbian congregation, probably about 80% gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender folks, and awesome congregation. I really love being there. I graduated in 2004 from the Candler School of Theology here at Emory, and got my Master of Divinity. And so now I serve at St. Mark as one of the pastors, and I also am a psychotherapist, so I have a small counseling practice also in the church, but a really diverse group of folks that are my clients. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. Pronouns, he, him, maybe sometimes she, depending on how my hair looks. When I was at Emory, I was on what they called at the time the President's Commission on LGBT Concerns. I think they've evolved the name a little bit now, but and then I also chaired Sacred Worth, which was the Candler LGBT group.
Hello everybody, my name is Pierce Hand. Only have Pierce here, so call me Pierce. I graduated from Emory in 2011, very recently, a year and a half. And I'm currently a public school teacher, so I teach in Atlanta Public Schools at Mays High School. Name, where at what I'm currently doing. Pronouns, I prefer masculine pronouns most of the time. And I came out during, Best in Show, I think, my junior year of college. So that's when I started working a lot with the Office of LGBT Life. Assuming that's the same name, right? Okay, great. And that's where I met Michael Shutt and a bunch of wonderful people, Danielle Steele.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Yu Kai Lin. I graduated here in 2001 in the College of Art. I got my bachelor's in piano performance, and I was also pre-med, which I don't do anymore. I prefer he or him. That's a unique question. I've not a question. I am art gallerist, curator, and I own an art gallery in Buckhead. We're soon to be moved to the west side. I also teach music. I teach piano, and I have a studio of 14 students. My oldest is 63, my youngest is 4. I am affiliated with Emory. Emory has asked me to be the director of a new group called Emory University Creative, which is an umbrella group that is all that encompasses all that's creative at the institution: photography, art, music, literature, and dance. Those 5 things. Performances, type of performances. So, and I wasn't gay when I came. I was gay actually. I've always been gay. But when I was here, I was not out. So after graduating, I came out to myself, and I came out to my parents, so it was a tough struggle, but it was a needed time in my life, and I learned a lot and gained a lot, and here I am. So, hey, is that it?
Yeah, and we just learned that you were a member of No Strings Attached. So
I was a musical director, so in a way I was gay. I was the director, and I was an SPC as well, student council, and I did a lot of social stuff. So we were social.
and before
we were
pass it to-
friends, except I'm older than
That's where I was just going to start out with that I'm a year younger than you guys.
We share the same birthday, actually.
Which is when?
July 3rd.
Okay, gotcha. And I would just, before we go into Josh, I just wanted to say, so the question about the gender pronouns, we do that in all the introductions that we do because there's a lot of privilege around the pronouns when we use them, and so we make a lot of assumptions. So now when we do introductions, we ensure that people talk about and use the pronouns that they use in their lives, because sometimes we make assumptions about that. So.
Okay. Well, my name is Josh Bornstein, and I graduated from the college with a degree in political science in 2002. And then I stayed at Emory and worked here for 3 more years because I loved it so much I just couldn't leave. And I was a hall director for Dobbs and McTier, and then I lived in Claremont and was a community manager that I don't have those anymore, out there for 2 more years. And then my sentence was complete, and I went on to work, and that was good too. So, let's see, my pronouns are masculine, he, him, and I came out at work several times. As I switched jobs, you have to sometimes do that over and over again, so nobody really tells you that. I wasn't out when I was at Emory. I lived on campus all 4 years. I lived in a fraternity house for 3 years and was petrified for no reason whatsoever, because one of the first groups of people I came out to were my fraternity brothers, and they were also really didn't care. They were very supportive. So that was a nice surprise. It was much more built up in my mind than anywhere else, as is often the case. But for a period of time, when I worked at CDC, life was easy. I think one of the things we're talking about at the table is that there are a lot of people at CDC who identify with the gay, lesbian community, and so that's really a nice thing. But then I went to work up in North Georgia for a little while, and that was different. And I was not out of work there, somewhat out of fear. I was working for the state health department, and it was just not a place that you felt comfortable. So that was really the only time. But after that job, I said I was never going to work in a place again where I couldn't be out at work from day one. So I'll talk a little more about that later, but you know, be discerning. You guys are a privileged, smart group of people, so you get to decide what you do. Let's see, what else have I forget? Good. All right, good.
Hi, I'm Kyle Cush. I'm the Vice President of Merchandise Analytics Process Solutions at Macy's. So we come up with making processes easier for our merchants and working to build profitability. Before that, I worked in finance for 18 years for Macy's. I went to the University of Southern California and graduated in economics in 1994. The first time I told someone I was gay, I was a sophomore in college. It was my roommate. It was not a big deal, although I was freaking out. At work, I was actually hired by a friend of mine who was gay, who got a promotion. So I was out right away at work, but not to my supervisors. It probably wasn't until 3 or 4 years later, in the later 90s, that I felt comfortable being out at work to my supervisors. Now it's, as I was telling my table, it's no big deal at all. Some of the most senior executives at Macy's are out, are married, have children, and it's just not a big deal.
Well, I have a couple of questions here, but before I ask my questions, I'm actually just going to turn the tables, and I want to start with to see if there are sort of starting questions out here. And so before I start with my first one, does someone have a burning question? Not everybody at once. Yes.
Which frat house? Oh no! Oh well, they could be.
No.
They're coming back.
They'll be back.
Yeah, they'll be back. Like, I was like, oh no.
High five. Third one on the left.
Other questions? Yes.
Just from a practical standpoint, would you say are the benefits or low sides of coming out work like when you join, like when you're supposed to say the junior-most person of the team versus going up the ladder a bit maybe and then is there any sort of
Got something on that.
I would say that being able to come out from the beginning, you can be your authentic self from the beginning. If you are, if you're waiting a couple of years to move up the ladder, as you suggest as an alternative, what are you doing those couple of years? Are you hiding part of who you are? Are you having to bring somebody else to what benefits? So the benefit to me is to be able to be your true self, which gets more and more important the older you get.
Absolutely, and I just want to build on that because one of the things that I started doing when I was applying for new jobs is I'll throw it in an interview sometimes, or so that way my boss will know a heads up. But when I started, I work in children's healthcare now, which is a great, open, and easy place to be out. But I work in a facilities department with a bunch of conservative type people who you would not think would be the most accepting bunch. A bunch of like engineering guys, and security guys, and all this. But for them, I never really came out. I just started referring to my partner and saying, here's what we're doing, and his parents, and this, that, and the other, and they all kind of got a clue pretty fast. There's a picture of me and my partner on my desk. That's the first thing that goes on my desk when I start a job. That's it. And like you said, you can, from day one, if you just own it and take it, that doesn't mean you have to shout from the rooftops if the environment is a little bit uncertain. As with every new experience you go into, I recommend just getting the lay of the land first, but definitely be who you are. Now, I will tell you that a really good friend of mine, who's a senior exec at a huge company in town, and he hasn't followed that same path. And he now, he and his partner have a little girl, and they don't know at work that he's gay, and they don't know that he has a child. And that's going to become, I think, increasingly more difficult as time goes on, because he's having to juggle and live in a little bit of fear right now, and then the older she gets, and that kind of thing. It's going to lead to a lot more questions. It seems everyone has to do what's right for them, but it seems easier to do up front.
And I think one of the things, and I can just add again, that understanding the environment you're going into is really important. And that doesn't mean you have to be out to every single person, like Josh was suggesting. So coming back to Emory in 2008, I knew it was a very open environment as a whole. I felt pretty comfortable coming back and being who I am. However, I sat in a meeting about 4 months after I got here, and I told my table this story with my dean and my supervisor and one other executive dean, and we were putting committees together. And they brought up, one of the people brought up, what about when they're looking at diversity on the committees? Do we have anybody that's LGBT on the committee? Which I was, well, that's great. I'm glad they're thinking of that. But I didn't know whether or not it was safe to speak up in that group of people, because I didn't know them well enough yet, right? I didn't know whether I could say, well, I represent that group, and I'm on the committee. So I didn't speak up. In hindsight, I probably could have, but again, I was still taking it all in and figuring out where I felt comfortable. And when I told my table, it all depends on you as a person. For instance, Michael and I lead very differently. I don't lead with my being a lesbian. I'm not a flag-waving lesbian. I have a safe space sticker on my door, and when I am partnered, I have my pictures in my office. When people ask me, I'm honest about it, but I don't go talking about it as the first thing about me.
It's on my business card. So
Exactly. But
we
even
infer.
So, I mean, everybody, I was just using that as a very opposite example of how different people go about being out at work.
I just wanted to say a couple things. You know, everyone has a right to their privacy, but you know, one of our core concepts at Macy's is integrity, and you know, you have to be open about who you are, or people will start to question. You know, you can't start lying at work. And one of the examples I gave, or one of the ideas I gave to my table was, I'm the executive sponsor of our LGBT group. You know, most corporations have employee resource groups, and big corporations have groups like that. And my recommendation is to join it right away. We need a whole group of people that you don't interact with on a day-to-day basis. There will be senior people that are involved with that committee that will help you get your name out there. One thing that happened to us in our group, we were looking for some key young leadership in our ERG, and we really wanted someone from marketing. And we knew there were LGBT people in marketing, but there was no one that was really vocal about being out. And as a corporation, you can't just start asking, hey, right? So we were not able to fill that void because there wasn't anyone in that pyramid that was living life openly. So certainly there are risks. Certainly, I would think in a small corporation you might face that, but there are less risks probably in a larger corporation, and there's a lot of benefit to be had.
Just quickly, you know, it just takes a certain, I mean, for me, I am a flag waver. Like, I make no apology for that. And I think that's part of my leadership style, is sort of a very assertive type person. You spend a lot of your time at work, you know, and it just takes a certain level of stress and anxiety out of your life to just kind of get it over with up front. I mean, if at all possible. I mean, again, you know, I've had the privilege of working in environments for the most part that either it was a non-issue or it was affirming, you know, or I've made it such when I first got there, you know, and you know, so that's, not everybody has that, but if it's kind of a, you know, I say go for it. That's my thing. I mean, because you know, you really change hearts and minds by being who you are and owning your full self and being that full self in the world. And you know, it's easier said than done for some, but it's, once you do it, a lot of times, like I think what Josh said, like it's, you know, it wasn't as, like looking back, it's like, oh, they didn't really care after all, or whatever. So I'm all about inviting good vibes in and getting rid of the anxiety and stress, and that's, I think, a really big way to do that.
I would tell you that I met my partner because I had an HRC sticker up in my cube at work, and so I think it's a little carrot for you guys that maybe it worked out really well. So.
Inter-office relations.
That's right. Different departments. Sorry.
You as a teacher, there may be, you are responsible for youth, and that creates my husband is a 4th grade teacher, so can you talk a little bit about what the classroom and parents and how you manage that?
Well, wait, do you want me to hit
Yeah,
that
go
question?
on. Yeah, so yeah, go
Okay.
with what you were.
Okay, awesome. So I was going to say, I think first of all, it's what you're doing, what profession you're in, but also if the company or school system, be it, has a non-discrimination policy. So in my school system, Atlanta Public Schools, we do have one for sexual orientation. So I felt a lot more comfortable about it, but not 100%. Also, I work with high school students, and high school students are the most nosiest people on earth. They want to follow you home. They will stalk you and ask you every question that's probably not appropriate in certain situations. But I think it's a lot more, the general consensus is it's a lot easier from the beginning, because as someone said, that you're at work probably a lot more than you are at home. And for me, I usually don't leave work until late. And so kids are always after school and around me. And it's hard to avoid it. My first semester, I was not out to my students because I wasn't completely sure it was something I wanted to do. But students just in casual conversation bring it up. Hey, Ms. Caldwell has pictures of her husband and kids. Do you have any? Or what did you do this weekend? And I spent the whole weekend with my boyfriend. I'm like, I went to the movies. You went alone? What'd you see? I'm like, no, I didn't go by myself. Well, who went with you? I'm like, let's focus on this assignment. So it's very hard to hide. So it's a lot easier to just hit it and hit it head on. My second semester I came out. The beginning of my second year, I had a new group of kids. I teach 150 kids. So first day, I just hit it head on. I was like, hi. Let me tell you about myself. Like, I can't bond with my students unless I'm very open and transparent with them, because I expect them to be the same with me. It's not a one-way door. I can't expect them to pour their hopes and dreams in my classroom if I don't do the same thing. So here's a picture of my partner. Here we are at my graduation and blah, blah, blah. And it's a scary place to be, but after I did that, it was a lot easier. I saw that it changed the way that I relate to people. I'm just a totally different person from my first semester. And that person, my kids, they clung to. They clung or cling? Clung? Clung. Yeah. So yeah, I'm constantly assessing my speed as I go. But they really held on to that, so I was grateful.
What subject do you teach?
Spanish. Entonces sí, habla español también. So if you have any questions, ask in Spanish. From now on, speaking. And that's it.
Yeah, you know, it's so much of a non-issue in the art world, but then again, it is an issue because I've met some conservative artists that didn't necessarily agree with my choice and my lifestyle, which I have to re-educate them and let them know that it's not a choice and it's not a lifestyle choice, it's just who I am. So it's, I don't know, I wasn't comfortable with myself here while I was at Emory, because I knew I was gay, but I was trying not to be gay. And then coming out to my parents was a huge thing, and then coming out to my best friends that were here and in high school really kind of made me open myself up to realize that it's really a non-issue for straight people to come out. But in terms of work, it shouldn't be an issue, and though it can be an issue, I think it's always important to gauge who it is you're talking to and where they fit in with what it is you're trying to get accomplished, and not make that something that should fester and be on the back burner, because you're there to get something accomplished together. And with my career path, I'm a teacher as well. So with my students and my kids, it's a non-issue because their parents know. I had a partner for 7 years, and I taught from my home in Buckhead, and so he would come home, and there we were. So and we had pictures of us, and so I was really comfortable with my kids knowing that I'm living a transparent life. And with the art gallery, it's almost given that you should be comfortable with being able to express who you are and the choices that you make in your life and your sexuality and everything else.
Other questions? Yes.
As a teacher, Pierce, did you feel that did you have other students come up to you and ask you about your experiences, and how did you tackle those?
What specific experience? Just being gay or
being
a gay teacher?
That and yeah, mainly that.
No, so students are very perceptive, and a lot of them know how far to question. And usually they question anything that pertains to them. They don't really ask just like random questions. Something I don't know, they have like a gay or lesbian uncle and aunt that did something. They want to know, hey, like, have you been to like this place? My uncle goes here all the time, and he says that it's a gay community. Like, no, I've never been there. Or sometimes I have, and I was like, yeah, they have great food, blah blah. But With students, most of my interaction around them concerning my identity has been them coming out to me, actually. I think I had a few students come out to me before I even came out during my first semester. And I think that was one of the things that also pushed me to make that decision. Because when I was in high school, we had teachers who would like all suspect that it might have been gay or something, but we never had anybody who was like out and like really proud of it. And so, yeah, I thought that was very important for me to go ahead and take that stance. And also as a teacher, one of my experiences is that there are no other out teachers at my school beside myself. There are some teachers that just don't prefer to let that enter their workspace, which is totally fine. It works differently for different people. But sometimes they'll be like, hey, are you and Mr. Armour really, really close friends? And I'll say, yeah, we're coworkers, we work together. But like that's their way of asking, like, oh, is Mr. Armour also gay or so forth. But they don't really ask about like experiences. They more so ask about my partner Scott and like what we do together, where do we go, what movies do we see, like very random and like not out of the ordinary things.
Did you face any hostility from any students who came out?
I faced more hostility before I came out. When I came out, it was completely different. Beforehand, students were very comfortable making homophobic jokes, especially my male students. I'm assuming it's a part of like the high school macho and checking dynamics or whatever. But like once I established, and I teach in single gender academy, so on one day I teach all boys, next day I teach all girls. So when I'm with my male students, it's all male. It's a classroom for 30 male students. My first day when I came out to them, it was just like completely silent. No one made any statements, nothing. When just before in the hallway, I had just heard someone call someone like a sissy or blah, blah, blah. So after that day, I made it a point for me to address those things whenever they came up in my classroom, because I make it very known to my students that I'm highly offended by any comments that or hate speech, be it gay, lesbian, making fun of someone's weight, anything in that that realm of like teasing and bullying. So after that, here now slip-ups from students, but not really, not that much. Not that much.
Just to add on to that, I think I like what you have to say about hate speech, and it doesn't get, it's not limited to the high school classroom. Yeah, and dealing with people on a routine basis, sometimes it's important, and all of us have to, and you probably have to do the same thing. When you lead people get comfortable around you, and if before they know, they'll start to say things, and it's very helpful to them if you point out what is offensive and what is not offensive. They may have been saying things for 25 years, having no idea that it's an offensive statement to make. So if you speak up and you do it in a respectful way, you say, hey, this hurts my feelings, and it's insulting to a whole group of people, you know, then they'll kind of, the light bulb goes off and they don't ever want to address them again. So you end up really helping out a whole lot of other folks at the same time.
Questions? I think it'd be interesting to know what's been the hardest thing about being gay in your workplace. Gay, lesbian, queer.
You know, for me, when you have a new boss that you haven't, maybe if you move pyramids, and it's a completely new group of people that you're dealing with, it's, you know, you have to brace yourself and think of how you're going to present yourself, when you're going to let people know, or just, you know, there's a period where you have to get used to that person and understand what that person's all about, because the person's really a stranger to you. You know, if you transfer jobs, I've transferred from LA to Minnesota, totally different teams of people, and then to New York, a very sort of conservative, old school group of people, and it's all worked out fine. But you know, those first few weeks where you're assessing what your dealing with can be very stressful.
I would definitely agree. I think having to do it over and over and over again, anytime you change jobs or get a new team or anything like that, it can be very stressful. And I will tell you that one time I started a job in DC and I came out to my boss and then he came out back to me. So that was a good moment. We had a fantastic working relationship. Things like that will happen which will just crack you up. But I think just the uncertainty, because you get to a point, even when I was working like in North Georgia, where you have to deal, and it's not just North Georgia, I mean right in Atlanta we have people who are close-minded, but those people tend not to bother you so much anymore. You're like, well, they're going to have their opinions, and you kind of write those folks off. I like what you said about pushing out the negative vibes and bringing in positive. You get to a point where you can just do that. The older you get, the further along in life you get, you can do that a lot better. At least that's what I'm learning. But you know, that moment of uncertainty is scary, and it never stops being scary. Just not knowing where somebody else stands on how you are on something that you cannot control or would choose to.
It's really true. Like every time, even as out as you are to yourself and your friends and people that you bring in close to your life, every day is an outing. I mean, every day you meet someone new with somebody that you either feel comfortable enough to say, hey, this is who I really am, or you feel like you don't want to say who you really are. So, I don't know, with my career choices, I worked at this fabric and furniture company called Donvia. I worked at ADAC and I traveled the entire southeast for the company. So it was every 2 weeks of travel, and I flew to every city in the southeast. And, I met with a lot of architects and designers and interior decorators. And it's an industry that's really embracing of homosexuality, or not necessarily embracing of gay people, but accepting, because it's a creative industry, and so that's what I've chosen. But every day is another coming out. If you have to, face someone new, you have to think about what they're going to think about when you say, "Hey, I like these."
For me, I think it is, especially being in a high school setting where I didn't have a lot of great moments with thoughts of homosexuality in high school. I think I was teased by some people also in high school. Not often, but I wasn't allowed to really explore homosexuality when I was in high school. So it's easy to see a student make a very hateful comment and then think back to moments where, like, I was in that same situation, someone said something similar to me. What's hard is being in a high school setting and knowing that students are moldable, that their minds are moldable, and that they're not set in stone yet. So a lot of times my students make comments, and just because it's been a retort they've used that they know will stop someone from teasing, or that they know will stop someone from making fun of some other deficiency that they may think they have. And so really just sitting that student down and like talking to them and really asking them, why would you say something like this? And why was that your first reply? And students are open books. They will really tell you everything about themselves. And, oh, I just say that all the time because, people stop talking to me whenever I say that one comment. And then you dig into like why it's inappropriate. And just keeping that mindset, because sometimes it can be really stimulating. And I can think back to moments where I was teased. And so, yeah.
I just would have to echo that, the hardest thing is gauging every situation and every person, with how you think they respond.
I think for me, I was born and raised in the United Methodist Church. It's home, it's my culture, it's kind of what's familiar to me. And it also has a policy that specifically says self-avowed practicing homosexuals are not welcome to serve as pastors or to be, married in our facilities or by our clergy. And I had a lot of anxiety around that for a while. I came out my first year of seminary here at Emory, and I put off my ordination for a while because I was afraid that I was going to get shut down. I didn't really want to deal with the pain involved in being kicked out of a church that really helped raise you. And then when we went through the ordination process and somehow made it through, I'm still not sure how that happened, but you know, I really had a lot of anxiety around church hierarchy, bishops and district superintendents and people that had, you know, that I perceived had power over me. But I just, at one point, just had to make peace with the fact that I've got to be who I am. I mean, it's just, I can't do this work of ministry the way that as an authentic person and sort of joining people where they're at and sort of being who I am where I'm at. I just can't do it unless I'm out and being true to who I am. And so I had to just kind of lay down those fears and just say, come what may, they can come kick me out if they want to. That's why I think part of the reason why I got my psychotherapy credentials, so I could go into private practice so they wouldn't hold me financially hostage to, you know, a job. So that was the hardest thing for me. And then once I finally just sort of reconciled that and laid down my fears around that, it really kind of opened up a whole new level for me.
We're going to do, I'm going to do one more question. And then I want to leave time, sort of do a conclusion and allow some time for everyone to just mingle and get cards and do things like that. So the last question, and there are about 64 more that I could probably ask right now. But I'm going to ask this one. Sometimes when we have these discussions, we talk about the challenges, the difficulties, and we can start in sort of this deficit orientation, if you will. And how do we reframe that in terms of strengths? Thinking about our identities as bringing strengths to the table. So let me ask you this, the deep thought to wrap it up, and that is, what are the benefits, either to you or to others, of you being out with all of your identities? And whoever wants to go first can feel free to go first, and then you get to decide which direction.
Oh, I'm totally doing that, and if I get the power.
You get the power.
So, the best thing is being able to show people that it really does not make a hell of a difference. Whether you are anywhere on the LGBT spectrum or not at all on it. And to help people see you just as an individual, and people actually get to do that. And it helps them grow, and it helps you grow because you kind of stop thinking about it after a while. And you get an opportunity to, whether or not you intend to be flag waving or not, you kind of are just by being there and being out in the workplace. You are, some people have never met an out gay person before, regardless of how old they happen to be or where they're living or what they're doing, their blinders are on. And you get to be that representative for our community. And they get to see that we come in all shapes and sizes, that we are smart, we are sometimes not so smart, that we make good decisions and we make not so good decisions, just like everybody else. And I think that's the biggest takeaway, is that we are just like everybody else. And that's a really good moment, and you see that happen to people around you. And then also one of the really good things is I'm having a little girl, hopefully next week, she's being born, and my super conservative boss from Indiana is one of the most excited people in the whole world that these two guys are having a little girl. So it's really neat to see that entire shift and that entire change when you come from that point of, here's a new transition, here's where you're really, really scared, to your boss, who you did not know how he was going to react, is super excited. It's not the game boss. Is super excited about two guys having a little girl, and that was something that was never in his playbook growing up all the way until he moved to Atlanta, probably very young. So it's neat to see that.
Although I'm from Indiana, and I will, be okay with your Indiana bashing.
I'm from Kentucky. I get to do that.
Pick your direction. Which way?
Oh, you guys know.
Oh, God. What was your question?
What are the benefits for being
out? I'm out. I mean, I am out as I can be. I do a lot with the gay community. We show a lot of gay artists. We represent a lot of gay art. So it's to me a non-issue. It's to me a really a great thing to be able to not have to worry about what somebody's going to think about you, because you're already a public person, you're already a public figure, and people know you as being out, and people know you as being gay. So I think it's a huge benefit to to accept who you are and to show people who you are and not have to worry about what people will think about you, even though that, we've lived a certain portion of our life doing that and hiding who it is we were. That makes any sense.
Great. I get to be me. I get to be myself. I'm a very social person. When I was here at Emory, I did like college counseling and 100 other things. And you can't really relate who you are to other people without just authentically being you. You can't share your passion with other people without being you. I started teaching through the Teach for America program, and I'm very passionate about getting my students to achieve at high levels. I can't do that if I don't feel comfortable around them, if I don't feel safe in my own classroom. I can't relationship build, which is a strength of mine with my students. Like, I will sit down and we'll talk about everything in your life, whatever it takes to get you to focus and study and do well in your exam. So I'm happy about that. I get to be myself and all of me.
And I think we're all starting to say about the same thing, but the benefit is you get to be your authentic self. You get to be who you are at work. You're not holding back. When you hold back one piece of yourself, you end up holding back a lot of other pieces, and you can't bring that passion that Bruce was talking about. And the benefit to others is when you live your life authentically and transparently, others will react in kind to the degree they're comfortable, and you have a much more real relationship with people that you work with. And just a side note, next year we're going to have a gay parenting. 2 new babies, right?
Did y'all get that? She's getting a baby in April also. I think the church has been the source of a lot of pain for the LGBT community, myself included. And so it's I think one of the greatest benefits for me, and what an honor it is for me to be able to stand in the pulpit as an out gay clergy person, and to say something different than what folks have been hearing maybe for their whole life, to say some words of affirmation and words of inclusion. I mean, that's just, people don't hear that a lot, and so it's just, it just makes me feel really good to be myself in the pulpit so that folks can see themselves reflected in me. If it's a gay person who's never seen a gay person in the pulpit before, they can see, oh my God, maybe I could do that. Or, this thing that's been such a source of pain for me for a long time is now a source of love and inclusion. And so that really, I appreciate being in that position and being able to offer that to folks.
Mine's really twofold. One is, if you're being honest with yourself, you'll build trust with your team, your peers, and your supervisors. Trust is very important at work. You're all trying to achieve the same goal, and if your people that you work with don't trust you, you're not going to be able to be as effective as you could be. The other thing I would say is if you're not honest with yourself and if you're not out at work, it causes a lot of distraction with yourself internally and really takes away energy that you could use to focus on climbing the corporate ladder and being more of a player at work or more effective at work. It's a distraction that will hold you back in your career, in my mind.
Well, to wrap up, one of the things that I want to point out is that everyone has very different experiences. And as you hear from all of these folks and their experiences, note that you all are going to have different experiences as well. We hope that you all will engage with us when you graduate so that you can come and represent all of your identities, because we represented some identities on this panel and not all of the identities under the sun, whether you're talking about our gender identities, our sexual identities, the careers that we could have up here. And so please stay engaged, because this is a really important part of this work. The other thing is as you're asking the questions and assessing things, ask a lot of people the questions. We learned, Michael Acock, one of our alums back here, hosted our first Out in Healthcare event. And one of our folks from our Career Center was there from the health professions peer mentor, or the health profession mentoring program for pre-health folks. And the message that they were giving out was, don't be out on your resume to med school. Now, we talked to all the med students, and they said, no, you really need to be out, because that will be really helpful to you. And so it's important to ask a lot of people these questions, because you're going to get different answers from different folks. There are also litmus tests that you can look for when you're applying for jobs in graduate schools. So from non-discrimination policies that I think some of you talked about, to talking to employees, there are things that you can look for to help you assess those situations. So just keep an eye out for that. I want to thank you all for being willing to come to campus and be out and talk to our students about your experiences. I think this is really important. I like to end with this strength piece, because I think you're demonstrating some of the strengths of us being out and building community. Some of you are already a part. If you haven't looked at our Out on Campus webpage, we have over 100 faculty, staff, students, and alums who are listed with their pictures, their gender identities, sexual identities, and how they're affiliated with Emory. And that's an important piece, because just knowing that we have someone that is out maybe in my profession, in my year, etc. And if you haven't done that and are interested in it, just let me know. We can get you hooked up with that webpage. A couple of other things that I'll state before I turn you all to the masses is that towards the end of this month, on the 28th, we're hosting our Pride Awards, and it's another opportunity for students, faculty, staff, and alumni to come together. It's at the Miller Ward House at 6:30. If you're a graduating senior or graduating from your graduate program, you can get your lavender diploma. If you're an alum and you haven't received your lavender diploma, you can also get one. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. At the Pride Awards, we also have actually three of our recipients in the room this evening. Josh will be receiving the Keeping the Faith Award, and so we'll receive that. Shu is receiving our Fierce Leadership Award from the Office. And Michael Aycock is receiving the Chestnut LGBT Person of the Year Award for all of his work that he's done over the years. And that's among a lot of the awards that we'll be giving out. So we hope that you all can come out for that. And we're in the process of planning our Out in Business event, which is a networking evening that will be hosted at an alum's house in April, late March, early April. And it's an opportunity for current business students, masters in business administration, alums of business, and faculty in business to come together and network. And so that is going to be mirrored off of our Out in Healthcare event that we've hosted for the last 2 years. So those are just a couple of the announcements. I can't thank you all enough for being here tonight. If you all could give them a round of applause. And 2 final shout outs again to Abby for being the wrangler of all things out at work. So thank you, Abby. Please give her a job as she's graduating. And I want to thank our folks from Macy's for being a part of this again. We know that there are companies and organizations that aren't very supportive of our community, you know, chicken sandwich dealers. And we know that there are companies that do a lot for the community. And it's not just about giving money and showing up at a Pride event. It's about treating their employees with respect and dignity and providing access, equity, and inclusion. And so we thank Macy's for creating that environment for your employees, and thank you for sponsoring.